Welcome to the Farm Life Podcast, brought to you by the Kings County Farm Bureau. I'm your host and Executive Director of the Farm Bureau, Dusty Ference. And our guest today is Steve Jackson, owner and operator, I guess, of Next Gen Water Consulting. Thanks for being with us, Steve.
It's great to be here, Dusty.
Why don't you take a second and tell us about yourself?
Yes, I have been involved in ag here in the Kings County area since the early 90s. My dad and I bought ground in the Dudley Ridge Water District back around 93, right after the last big drought.
All right.
And farmed there for about 3 decades. And but during that time, I served on the Dudley Ridge Water District Board and got involved in the current water bank and really realized that our policies and how we were impacting water deliveries and water supply in the state was going to be critical to our long-term farming success. So that kind of got my interest in water issues years ago. And during the last we sold off some of this property. We just finished selling off stuff in Dudley Ridge about 2 years ago. But and since this time, I worked for some different farmers on a water consulting basis. Worked for them on boards. And the last few years, I actually put up my own shingle and decided to continue to help farmers throughout the area deal with these SGMA issues. Because I was on 2 different GSA boards for about 5 years, deeply involved in the policy and the details behind the scenes, all the little minutiae that we had to deal with to figure out how to do a plan. None of this has been done before, Dusty. I think sometimes people forget that we have a manual to go to, but. So I've really enjoyed my work working with larger, I'd say mid to large growers in the valley from about Fresno County south to Kern County, sorting out issues, trying to keep my mantra is my goal is to try to keep as much of our farm ground farmed.
Yeah.
And that's, as you are well aware, is a challenge, right?
Bigger challenge every day.
Huge challenge. So here locally, I've been involved with a grower here who's got ground in South Fork Kings GSA, and I've been on the stakeholder committee there for the last, I don't know how many months. It seems like we've been doing this for forever.
I think we're coming up on a year of that committee.
And we're working diligently to go forward. So that's a little bit of background.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked where we want to go, but if you want to jump on, we can talk about stuff there. But I'm very vested in the success of the Tulare Lake Basin. And that's what I'm really laser focused on for the GSAs here, especially the one I'm working on, is to get an approved plan together, or get a plan that we can get approved.
Right.
Let me rephrase that. We gotta get it approved.
Got to get it approved.
So I don't know.
Well, that's what Farm Bureau's concern is, really. All of these subbasins are tied together, and we focus on the Tulare Lake subbasin. It's not the only subbasin in Kings County, but it's the majority of the county.
Yes.
And we try and remind everybody that'll listen that every GSA in the subbasin has to be successful if any of us are going to succeed.
Right.
So we try and spread our conversations out, and that's why we invited you here to talk a little bit about your perspective on the South Fork Kings GSA Grower Advisory Committee.
Yes, happy to. We've been meeting almost bi-monthly here the last few months just to move some policy forward. South Fork Kings, regrettably, we hadn't really put some policy, really some meat on the bones for a lot of what we needed to have in an approved GSP. As you well are aware, we filed one GSP for the basin, and that didn't go over too well.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. As we all are aware, there's been a lot of political upheaval in some of the GSAs, namely here at Mid-Kings River. The South Fork has taken upon itself. Now we've got a group together. We meet about every 2 weeks, at least once a month, and some of the stuff we're trying to get over every 2 weeks to move policy forward. Our focus is getting a GSP together so we can resubmit it back to the State Water Board. Part of that problem is that we know we needed to have a demand reduction policy in place.
Mm-hmm.
That's a touchy subject, as you are well aware.
Well aware.
It kind of blew up over here in Mid-Kings, regrettably. So we've taken it upon ourselves to really invite landowners, and we've had pretty decent involvement at every meeting.
Good. That's good to hear.
Good give and take on what we think will be a policy that growers can and I would say live with, could stomach
Yeah.
to get us to the sustainable yield. One of the big numbers that we finally landed upon here recently, and I don't know where Dusty, where the Big Kings is at, but we see our basin sustainable yield right now. We're saying at 0.66 acre foot per acre.
Okay.
That's what we're putting out there. That's the number we're using. And I think the biggest thing that we've dealt with, and I think it's going to be on both sides of the river, is our shallow aquifer, the a quote A zone layer that became a hot topic for many growers. And the geology here with the river and the ditches, all the ditch water coming through here, there's a lot of water that seeps out and it's kind of captured or it kind of stays in a very shallow layer. I think the plans that were initially drafted a year or two ago were really going to limit that to next to nothing on extraction.
Right.
And we are basically saying, hey, South Fork Kings are going to take a different approach. We're going to say, hey, we're going to allow you to pump 3 acre feet of that layer.
Oh, interesting.
That A zone.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing we'll have to draft is that we're not going to impact the beneficial users, which are domestic.
Right.
Right. So we'll have to be very careful how that policy is instituted, because I think the state board will be very suspect of that.
Sure.
But that's a number that we felt it's not going to roll over, and there's no sustainable yield in that.
Okay.
So you're just going to get a flat 3 acre feet. You can pump that every year. That's there. Some of the drought years, that water probably went away.
Yeah.
But we see that water as sustainable, and we didn't want to penalize growers and say, hey, you can't access that water. So, but we're not going to get a sustainable yield. So that's not going to carry over, and it's not tradable. In other words, that what you have on your ranch, you can pump it and use it to grow crops on that you've always done.
Right.
So I think that's a policy that we put out here this last few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's got a positive reaction. Obviously people are still wanting to have unlimited access to that A zone, but we think this is a happy medium, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. The last policy that I read on A zone water really didn't account for any kind of tree crops in that area, and pumping half an acre foot, I think was the number in the last policy, would have drowned almond and walnut trees in that area.
I think we heard from our growers loud and clear.
Yeah.
We're trying to be responsive, Dusty.
Sure.
We gotta get buy-in.
Right.
So we think this will work. And then we also have, for the B zone, we're going to cap that at 3. We're going to give a transitional, I think 2.34 or something over the next 5 years. You can pump on top of your 0.66.
Yeah.
So that will be capped at 3 acre feet. And then the C zone, we're going to cap at 2.
Right.
That's where I know one of the GSAs has already put a cap at 2 acre foot. So we want to be similar at that zone with others, because we're going to have to coordinate.
Coordinate.
Right. So, and then one more thing that's unique is we're going to say, hey, you can cumulatively pump up to 4 acre feet if you tap your 3 acre feet on your A zone. We're going to allow you to access some of the B or C zone as well.
Oh, that's got to be seen as a favorable change.
It was. We're realizing that growers have not just a lot of them have A zone, but they might have a B or a C on that ranch too. And so we're saying, hey, we're going to give you a little flexibility. We'll see how that flies. I know. It all comes back to how we're going to deal with the impacts,
right?
And the biggest one will be the domestic domestic well owners. And so I think the mitigation plan, how we develop that, will be key in getting that sold to the state water board, and eventually back to the department. So we're working on that, but let me just quickly shift to subsidence management.
Sure.
That is probably the biggest concern I have, Dusty, is how we're going to deal with subsidence in this Tulare Lake Basin. We are in South Fork going to approach it on this similar to what the Tule subbasin has done, where they've taken 4 sections and put them in 4-section grids.
Mm-hmm.
So you got 2,400 acres, and you're going to manage subsidence, have minimum thresholds for each area, and then you'll have you'll have measurable objective, but you'll have a threshold that if you hit a certain exceedance, let's say 50% of that minimum threshold, then you'll trigger actions that will restrict groundwater pumping below the clay layer.
Yeah.
So that's how we're dealing with it in Tule, and it's really it's going to be very difficult for, I think, a lot of landowners to even stay viable. I'm dealing with a large landowner in Thule right now. That it's going to be a huge impact to his operation because his deep wells will be inaccessible, I think, within 2 years based on the rate of subsidence.
Right.
So that is something I know that we're going to have to grapple with here in the Tulare Lake subbasin.
Yeah.
Subsidence regrettably, Dusty, as you're aware, it creeps even up into the Hanford area that we have going from basically, I'd say from 198 going south along Highway 43,
Right.
just continues to increase as you go south. So that to me is going to be a real difficult way to we're going to have to coordinate too, and that will be another concern I have with the GSA process and the GSP, and as we go about having 5 different plans, right?
Yeah.
That will have to be coordinated at some point.
Yeah, that's right. Subsidence seems to be probably the hardest part of all of this, to figure out how we address that in a way that satisfies the state regulatory agencies. And I've talked to a lot of growers here recently about this management zone scenario. And while it makes sense, a lot of growers have a lot of heartburn over it. They see their access to water going away very quickly based on these management zones and how the ground reacts and how the water levels react.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Lower Tule and Pixley irrigation districts have adopted this plan, so it's already in place. And they went back to the state water board. They had a meeting last week. They're very focused on trying to get themselves carved out like Delano Early Mart was. As far as carved out, it's not having to report or pay fees. So they presented this mitigation plan of subsidence, and the state board staff came back and said, hey, that looks great. However, Dusty, for the landowners, it looks terrible.
Right.
Because, as you just said, your access to your most productive water source, and let's face it, we're in desert climate. So the water districts that have been developed over the last 100 years have done a great job bringing water to us, but they don't have water for us every year.
Right.
And sometimes the runs aren't for maybe a month or two. So we're very dependent on groundwater everywhere. Even in the best of the water districts, you depend on your water, and the water wells have been drilled deeper because of these droughts we've gone through the last 20 years. We had some pretty hefty drought cycles. And so everybody I know, including myself, have drilled below the sea, below deep wells, 800 to 1,500 feet deep. So if we lose access to those, wow, that will be a huge impact to our farming footprint.
Huge.
In the valley here, in the Central Valley here, right here. So my honest opinion is, I don't think we can hit the zero subsidence goals that the state has put out. I know we can't hit them right away. It's going to be too big of a hit. And so, even if we were to stop pumping today, Dusty, there's probably going to continue to be residual subsidence, right? So we're in this kind of really, I would say, crazy time trying to figure out how best to slow subsidence. How can we keep as much of our farm ground viable? Because again, my concern is if these farmers lose access to deep wells, before you know it, they're going to be going out of business. The banks will be taking it back, and some of this ground will probably be forever retired, because once you have no access to it, you can't buy it. There's no way to go get a loan on that ground.
Right.
And we're dependent upon that. So I would say just stay tuned on that. I would say to all growers, stay tuned to the policies being developed here, especially in the Tulare Lake area, because the Tule Basin has put it out there, and they have. It is, I would say, hey, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep all that ground farmed, especially permanent crops. I'd say that it will be the death of permanent crops on these subsidence management plans, because you will not be able to, you could row crop, right? And you could probably access water on a more limited basis, maybe shallow, and then maybe as conditions improve, you may have access to some of this water. To farm road, but you need access to water for permanent plantings every year.
Trees got to be
watered, right? Yeah. So that is that is a big concern. And I don't know if we have an answer for everybody right now, especially for the state water board. I don't know if we have a really good answer because I don't want to bend over and say, hey, we're going to do all this before we really look at the impacts of what that means to landowners in the Tulare Lake Basin.
Yeah, that's the hard balancing act, and that's something we focus on all the time is how do you create a plan that doesn't bankrupt the growers, and really decimate our community, but at the same time satisfies the Department of Water Resources.
Right, right. My concern, and I think that's probably some of the impetus behind the litigation here from the Farm Bureau is my concern is the board has pushed the goalpost down the road. They keep pushing the goalpost, and I think we've got to. I think hopefully staff will hear that we're working on this in good faith to become sustainable, and we need them to work with us and not move these goalposts down the road,
Right.
and recognize some of these things that are mandated in the law. I get it, but there might be we might need to look at some ways that we can give a little more time or be more open-minded to some more creative solutions for the area.
Well, that's how the law is written. Laws are written so that the goalpost is clear and defined and doesn't move. Some of these agencies have arbitrarily moved them on us. But Sigma, the law itself, is written in a way that we should have time to implement things. And you implement a practice, you make a change, and you have to. Everything in water takes time to react, right? You need a time period to prove your theory or not. And we haven't been given that opportunity because of the actions of the state board.
Yeah, yeah, you're correct. And I think the basins that are in this probation status, which is Tulare Lake and Tule, just look around. There's been tremendous political upheaval when we got placed on probation.
Yeah.
In Tulare and Tulare Lake, we had McKees River had completely blew up. In the Tule subbasin, we have the eastern Tule GSA is completely imploding.
Yeah.
All due to this, probationary status that we were put in, and really not clearly knowing how we were going to get out of it.
Right.
I think I think for yourself, I know you're deeply involved in this, Dusty. I think we want to make sure that we have a clear path to get out of the probationary status. So, we're focused on getting back to South Fork. We're looking at getting some policies in place, demand management, a subsidence management plan, a groundwater recharge plan, and ways that we can protect groundwater quality. And then also domestic well mitigation if necessary.
Yeah.
So, we're going to go through and do what we've seen that has been done for the approved areas. And so we're just saying, hey, state staff, be open to these plans as they come back to you and give us the benefit of the doubt on some of these things. So as you said, Dusty, the law says we got till 2040 to be sustainable. In some of these areas, we're going to need every bit of that time to adapt. And I tell some growers, I would love to tell you I can save all of your irrigated ground. I don't know if I can do that. We're going to do our best to get policies in place that will allow you some flexibility to keep as much as possible. But on the other side, Dusty, I'll just quickly say this. We have, even my family has been involved in developing ground back in the 70s that was not in an irrigation district. So I think I've recognized personally that we have over extracted groundwater in some areas that have never had a chance to even recharge it. It was ground that had never been in a water district. So we are kind of reaping some of the stuff that we've done over the last 50, 60, 5 or 6 decades.
Right.
So it's going to take a while to correct some of these areas. There's some great plans out there. There's some good, like the blueprint and some others that have some bigger picture things that we can maybe help. The Hail Mary type things that, hey, can we do something that will be big out of the box thinking, which I think is important, So hopefully we can see some of these things come along that will help capture more water on these wet years and get it to areas that you really need it. And I would say right now we need to move some of this surface water to areas that are really subsiding.
Yeah.
I know Aaron Fukuda at TID is looking at, I haven't looked at all his plans, but I know one of the things they're looking at is trying to move their surface water to the areas that are the greatest subsiding portions of his irrigation district.
Sure.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Westland's Water District has got policies in place to help mitigate their subsidence issues along the front, the California aqueduct. So You can do that in irrigation districts, right?
Yeah.
It's the areas that are not in the irrigation district, or we have limited supplies, but the areas outside of irrigation districts that are subsiding, there's really very little you can
It's a
really
lot
do.
harder.
It's a lot harder.
Yeah.
There's not much you can do to mitigate that.
Yeah. You brought up the amount of time that it took to get us in this situation, and it's going to take time to recover from that. And I don't disagree with anything you said. I also think that we need to look at the state and federal governments and some of their actions over that same time period. Our forests aren't managed properly and they're overgrown, and that has an implication on how much snow makes it to the ground and how our snowpack decreases. And then when spring and summer come along and snow's melting, all those trees are using more water, and we're not getting the water that we probably should be getting because we're not managing the forest properly. Human intervention is good and bad, always, I think, and we need to look at those policies and how some of our resources are managed. Because we can't manage this, we can't manage our way out of this situation as the agriculture community in the southern Central Valley alone. We'll never get there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. My brother has been involved in some forest stuff, and he's kind of enlightened me some of the issues that we see throughout the state in our state. And we have so poorly managed our forests, Dusty, to your point, that it's been overgrown. We've had increasingly hotter fires, that basically just scorched, completely wiped out the forest. And so we need to manage it's a holistic whole process, because when you got overgrown forest, it's going to keep a lot of the water that melts. It keeps it up in the forest. It doesn't can become runoff.
Right.
So yes, there's a lot of play here for us. I think the thing that you always hear, I hear it too all the time, is come get more storage built. I would love to say yes, I would hope, but I mean, obviously that the issue here in California has been regulations.
Yeah, and storage is great, but we've quickly here listed a few things that could be done relatively quickly to increase supplies, and really probably benefit more than just the surface water supply.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
So the other issue I think here locally, I would just touch on too, is the recharge issues in Tulare Lake. A large portion, I would say the majority of South Fork Kings, and this is, we've had to recognize this in our recharge policy, it overlies this shallow clay layer. So we are looking at, eventually we're going to have to cooperate with maybe a neighboring GSA, maybe Kings, but recharge potential is going to be more on the northeastern part of this Tulare Lake subbasin. So, I mean, that's another thing that we looked at. It's been very successful in Kern County. There's been quite a bit of recharge projects over in the Kuya area, that even on the eastern side of the Tule subbasin too, the recharge project. So that's something we could do. We can capture some of these wet flows, right? They're easily within our grasp.
Yeah.
Again, it's going to be limitations. Though geology is limiting some areas of the basin. It's really, I would say the whole the western part of the Tulare Lake is pretty much impacted by a clay. So it's really going to be the northern part that has that. So, but yeah, I would say, I think some people get discouraged with it, but I think we have to continue to be proactive.
Yeah.
As landowners, those who are involved in it on the consulting side, I work with a lot of great people who are really focused on trying to capture as much as we can of our farm ground. Because I see, hey, I just want to put a little, stamp on the fact that, our family's been here for generations.
Right.
And I want to leave something when I'm gone.
Yeah. That
my grandkids and great-grandkids that can continue to be involved in this great industry. The ag industry here has been, it's been just an impactful one. And it's, like you said, it's primary employer for our area.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the more noble things we do in our society, is growing food and fiber.
Agree.
For people. So whatever I can do to help that, and I appreciate your efforts here at the Kings County Farm Bureau. It's been great.
Thank you.
And so I would put a plug in for everybody out there. Hey, support this efforts over here at the Kings County Farm Bureau. They
appreciate that.
It's not a cheap endeavor to try to push back on some of the regulations that we're facing. So I want to put that out for you, Dusty.
I thank you. I plug it, but it's always good to hear it from somebody else.
Yeah. Thank you. It's there is. I think I sense from the hearing back in April when you guys brought a lot of the growers up there too. I think there is a real frustration with some of the agencies' lack of really listening.
Yeah.
To people and the impacts it's going to have to their livelihood, right?
Yeah, we talk about unintended consequences a lot, and unfortunately, we, as an industry, we don't have a great track record of effectively pushing back and trying to manage some of those unintended consequences.
Right.
I'm sure we could talk all day about legislation that was intended to do well and hurt, industry sectors or employees or, the list goes on, right? And this time we found an opportunity and decided it was time to push back and try and manage some of that.
Right. Well, ultimately, we're still in probation, so at some point, this litigation will be back out. It will be settled.
Yeah.
And we'll have to. That's why we got to stay focused on, which I know that you've been monitoring all this in the Tulare Lake Basin, but we got to stay focused on getting our plans revised and be prepared to resubmit them to the State Water Board. So again, I think getting growers pay attention to what's happening in your area, and we are hopeful that we can get these plans revised this spring, and then before it's crazy to think about it, but we're almost approaching a year from our probationary hearing.
It's coming up real quick.
So I know the South Fork's not going to have a plan to be done by April. It's probably going to be in May before we can probably get something completely revised. But I don't know where Mid-Kings is at either. I think they're probably still working through.
They're behind South Fork.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to pass our year date. So
Yeah.
I think growers know that they're, without the litigation, we could possibly facing impose a plan put on the basin by the State Water Board.
Yeah, without that litigation, that would be impending. We would be waiting an interim groundwater plan from the state board, and that would look way worse than anything we're coming up with locally.
Right. So I think that's really important that we get this done. I've talked to some managers and other GSAs in Tulare Lake, and I think they're quickly. I think the two southern ones are south of us are close to having their plans done. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon Mid-Kings and South Fork to get their plans updated and submitted, and then we'll have to work through the details of coordination. Right?
Yeah,
that's something we didn't have to deal with. We had one plan, but now we're going to have 5 plans, and so that will require some, obviously GSA coordination.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that shakes out and how the Department of Water Resources takes that. I was at a conference last week down in Bakersfield, and Carla Namath from DWR was there, and Paul Goslin also, and they both are still advising subbasins to have a single plan and giving credit for those few subbasins that have a single plan. And we were one of them, and to undo that, I really, really am curious to see how the department's going to react to that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when you look at how the basins that have been approved and those who are going through this probation or these hearings and how they look like they're going to get out of it, they really have coalesced around one common management plan.
Right.
So they've had some basins where they still have a few plans, but they really have worked to be hand in hand on how they're going to deal with the mitigation, sustainable, management criteria. And so even to me, I'll just say this real quick. It was amazing to see how the current subbasin, which is the largest in the state, probably the most diverse geology as well, how they came together and have surprisingly, but I tip my hat to them. They have worked so hard to get a common management plans together across 1 million acres of ground.
1 million acres, I think 17 GSAs and
20 GSAs.
20 GSAs.
20 GSAs. There are 7 plans.
Okay.
And so, in the board, I was at the hearing. I went to the hearing a few weeks ago, and they made reference to that too a few times. Board staff members were saying, "Hey, this is amazing. You guys we didn't know if you guys literally could do this." Right. They literally said that we didn't know if we could actually pull this off.
Yeah.
So they for those who don't know, that the Kern Basin got continued until September of this year. And I came away from that meeting really feeling that I think they're really on the path, working through a few more details. They still got some more things they have to do there, but it looks like they're on a path of getting put back to the Department of Water Resources. Again, it's all the little details they have to work out, but we hope the board doesn't move the goalpost down any further. There was a requirement at the end. I got in the resolution, which I found interesting, and this is something I've spoken up at our South Fork GSA or our stakeholder meeting. The board put an additional requirement for more communication to the disadvantaged communities. They had a specific part. They amended the resolution to require the subbasin to do a better job reaching out, engaging those who are impacted that could not make it, or communities that don't speak English.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, Desi, that we take a look at that in our subbasin.
Yes.
That we need to be sure that we reach out to the communities here. We have a lot of small disadvantaged communities in the Kings County area, that we do the translation. We get people out in Spanish, that we reach out to people and communicate what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's going to be key to getting our plan approved too.
Right.
So I think it's important that we take a look at what others are having to do.
Yeah.
And be proactive on that as well.
And that's a twofold approach, right? The agency is going to require that. But we saw the Mid-Kings River GSA fall apart a year ago because of a lack of transparency and a lack of communication. I read a headline, I didn't get to the whole story, but I read a headline recently that South Fork Kings held a grower workshop, and it sounds like maybe attendance was less than desired. And even as the Farm Bureau, I didn't know about that one until after the fact, right? So communication is the hardest thing we do in 2025, I think. That's the hardest part of my job here at the Farm Bureau, is making sure people understand what we're actually doing. But without buy-in from the community, these things aren't going to go anywhere. We've seen that time and time again in recent history.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. I know Johnny probably Gale will be listening to this podcast, but I know he's doing all he can to reach out to people.
Yeah,
it's a challenge to do. Is it email? Is it mailers? Is there ways is there any places talking to different community groups? I mean, I think this is the Farm Bureau has done a great job. I would encourage people to keep track of the Farm Bureau newsletter. Say on the email list. Make sure you're on the contact list on your GSA.
Yeah.
Right. I would definitely encourage you to do that. But I think the community involvement, that's good. That's a good challenge for us.
That's a huge challenge for everybody.
Right.
And our experience is you've got to be everywhere, and you're still not going to reach everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I was involved in a LAFCO proceeding. We were working on expanding the irrigation district down in the southern part of Tulare County, and we were surprised. We had, with the LAFCO board approved it, this expansion of this water district, but we just found out that the disadvantaged community there didn't have notice.
Okay.
And so they're challenging the LAFCO proceedings. So I was really disappointed. I thought we had done it, but we didn't get across. We didn't communicate to the right people in the community. So it's okay. I mean, sometimes I know we get frustrated with this, but I think it's better to be overly communicated, make over extra effort to communicate with people. And I think a lot of times we have to be patient.
That's right. Yeah.
So sometimes it gets frustrating for those involved in this process that, hey, I thought we've done everything. I said, well, we probably still haven't done enough, guys. So we just got to continue to put a smile on our face, communicate. These issues impact these disadvantaged communities too, because it's impacting their potential employment.
That's right.
So I think, if anything, I would be focused on, hey, you need to pay attention to these things, to these communities. That we need to get it out there in Spanish as well.
Yeah.
That they understand, hey, yeah, these are issues impacting groundwater wells, but your water supply, but it's also impacting those who you may be working for in the area too, and that eventually may impact your ability to find some jobs.
That's exactly right.
Please pay attention. And at the same time, you might want to help advocate for this as well, right? A more balanced approach. We have a work cut out for us. We have,
for sure.
We haven't communicated we haven't reached everybody.
No, and we never will, but there's always more we can do, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Steve. So anything else about the South Fork Kings GSA that we didn't cover that listeners should know about?
No, I would say definitely get in all of just make sure you're on the contact list. Make sure you go to the GSA website and make sure you're on that. You're on the list of, you'll get contacted at meetings and upcoming events.
Yeah.
So no, I don't. South Fork Kings is just one of the 5.
Right.
So we're working at it, and hopefully within a month or two we'll have our plan ready. So
yeah. Do you want to plug yourself or Next Gen Water?
No. Hey, I just again, my passion is to help, is keep farm ground. It's a pretty simple mission I have.
Yeah.
It's just to help growers um, keep as much of our ground farmed. And so maybe that's a big picture, uh, vision or goal. But for me, it's a lot of detail. It's going to be a lot of advocacy. I spend a lot of time lobbying. I do serve on some water boards still for some larger growers in Kern County. So it's a multifaceted issue that I'm involved in. And so, yeah, if anybody wants, I've been more than happy to, if anyone has any questions or anything, you can feel free to reach out. I can, give you some input, or if you ever want some help as well. But I would just say, basically, each landowner needs to be engaged.
Yeah.
And a lot of this can be, you can just put your engagement and speaking up, writing a letter. Sometimes it can be as easy as that.
Landowner voices are the most important voice.
Our key. And I think I would definitely encourage landowners, please stay involved. I can help. I can only do so much, right? But it really comes down to the stakeholders themselves. The landowners who show up at these meetings, Dusty, carry a lot of weight.
Yeah.
A lot of weight.
Yeah, we run into that at Farm Bureau. There's an expectation that we're in the room and we're there as much as we can, but hearing an opinion from me or from the Farm Bureau is a lot different than hearing it from a landowner directly.
Yes.
And we encourage all of our members, all landowners in the area, to show up to these meetings. We know it's tough. They're different times of day, different locations, but your voice matters, and you've got to deliver your message.
Right. And I wish I could tell growers here that we're kind of like this, we're towards the end. I think we're only in the beginning.
I agree. I agree.
We haven't even got a plan approved, and then once the plan's approved, the difficulty will be in implementing the plan. I think that's where the growers need to really stay involved and pay attention.
Yeah.
Because it's great to have a plan approved, but as we've seen, like I farm in Kauai, plan, I think we're on the pathway to get it approved, but it's got to be at the grower's expense, which I understand. We knew I farm in the white area, so we knew things were coming.
Yeah.
There. But we're making adjustments. I farm almonds, and so we're having to adjust fallow some ground that we weren't planning on, but that's part of this whole process of becoming sustainable.
Right. And you bring up a great point that we don't often talk about. That we see the plan as the goal line, and really that's not it. We might have a sigh of relief once that plan is approved, but I think the real work begins implementing that plan.
Exactly. I mean, people farming in the the Kings Subbasin right north of the Kings River. I know many thought, hey, we're done. We're approved. Hey, we don't need to worry about it. And I said, no. We still have, SGMA is requiring us to be sustainable, and there's still issues with some groundwater quality, groundwater level. There's some areas that are still white lands in the Kings Subbasin that are going to have to face some groundwater demand reduction, right? So these plans will continue to be implemented. So please don't just think it's once it's approved, even it's getting implemented.
Right.
And I think that's what I hear. I'm hearing more from the state Department of Water, and I think State Board too. They want to make sure that once these plans are implemented or they approved, that the implementation gets actually done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's where the heavy lift is on the landowners.
Right. That's when it really
these expectations of getting these areas sustainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly right.
And Dusty, this is a topic you and I can talk on for a few hours
all day long.
I've enjoyed whatever it is we can do, my efforts, but please, I would just encourage people to stay involved. I'll put another plug in for the Kings County Farm Bureau. You guys
thank
do
you.
A great job.
Thank you.
So stay tuned with what Dusty's got going on here, or tune in these podcasts.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for being here. We're going to end this on that positive note. We appreciate you. I want to plug. We the Farm Bureau are hosting 2 informational meetings on the lawsuit against the State Water Board and their decision to place the subbasin on probation. The first is coming up Wednesday, April 9th at 3 p.m. at the Lemoore College, or West Hills, for those of you that don't know. Lemoore changed their name. And the second will be Wednesday, April 30th at 9 a.m. at the St. John's Hall here in Hanford. We invite everybody to come out and listen to a presentation on how we got here, what's going on with the State Water Board, what we think next steps are. and just kind of get a general update on the work that Farm Bureau has been doing for every grower and everybody in Kings County.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks,
Steve.
Dusty.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.